One of the biggest mistakes that organizations make when going through digital transformation is they think that their software vendor or the system integrator can manage the entire project. However, this is a big mistake, and I want to talk about why that is here today. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world reach their third stage of digital transformation success. And one of the things that we provide to our clients is a service to help them manage their overall projects. And clients that we work with oftentimes think that they already have project management covered because they've hired a technology vendor, a software vendor, implementation partner, system integrator to help them through the project. And while those parties, those third parties, have an important role in a digital transformation, it's not the only role. It's only one of many roles that need to be played and managed during a project. So what I want to do today is talk about the various things that need to be managed during a project and how you need more than just what a software vendor or system integrator can provide to help you manage that overall implementation. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America, as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation, and you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. The first thing to be mindful of is the fact that technology is just one work stream in an overall transformation. There are generally several work streams that need to be managed. And a lot of times we, as humans, tend to gravitate towards the shiny object, the thing that we can touch and feel. And in the case of a digital transformation, that's the technology, that's the software. We can see it, we can touch it, we can feel it, we know whether or not it's working. It either works or it doesn't, and it's pretty clear that there's software being built. The problem with the other stuff is that it's oftentimes harder to see, touch, and feel. So you think about things like organizational change management or process improvement, the overall architecture, the data integration, overall user acceptance testing, the overall project governance. Those are all examples of work streams and activities that need to happen in order to make the project successful. These other non-technical work streams, however, are the things that are more likely to make your project succeed or fail. So we really need to be looking outside the realm of what just a technology vendor does and recognize there's a lot of other activities that need to happen. Now, there's one way to think of this too that's really helpful, is to think of what the technology vendor does and the system integrator. Think of what they do as a project. It's one project within an overall program. So in other words, you have a technical application work stream that your software vendor and the implementation partner will handle. And then you have other work streams that other parties might handle: change management, data, integration, migration, testing, all that good stuff. And at the end of the day, you need a project governance and program management to manage the entire picture. So if you want to learn more about this concept, I actually have a whiteboard video on my YouTube channel that you can find right here, where I dive into the difference between program management, project management, and then I unpack all these different work streams and how they need to tie together to complete a program. But in the meantime, suffice to say, it's important to recognize that technology is just one work stream, and therefore your technology partners, yes, they need to be managing that one work stream, but that is not the end-all, be-all answer. Another reason why you don't want your software vendor or your implementation partner to manage the entire project is that their financial incentives and your incentives as an organization are typically very different. Software vendors typically want you to start buying and using software as quickly as possible so that they can start making their subscription revenue off of your usage of that. So their job is to make sure you implement as fast as possible, which sounds good in theory, but as I'll talk about in a second, there's some downside risk to that. On the services side, what oftentimes happens with system integrators and implementation partners is because they make their money on services, they want to compress and front load as much of the revenue as they can because they want to realize that revenue faster. So what they'll do is they'll staff up the project with an assumption that it's going to be, say, 18 months. But in reality, it might take 24 or 36 months. And what they do is they'll front load that project to realize a bunch of that revenue up front. And if and when you run over budget, you're going to continue at that same run rate. And that's how projects go over budget. Now, the downside or the bad news here is that this benefits the implementation partner for the software project to go over budget. However, it hurts you as a customer. And so you can see how there's dual incentives here on the vendor side to compress the timeline in an unrealistic way to realize their revenue as soon as possible. Now, if you're on the customer side, your incentives are totally different. You want the project to be successful. You want to right-size your spending. You want to mitigate and manage risk. You want to make sure that you end up in a better position after the implementation than you were before. And those are two very different things. It may sound like you can accomplish both, but when you compress a timeline and realize revenue up front and sell a bunch of software too soon to a customer, that customer ends up spending way too much money. They're not mitigating risk. They're not going at a measured pace in their transformation. And oftentimes that's what leads to either budget overruns, time overruns, and/or operational disruption at the time the customer goes live. So we have to recognize that there's competing priorities here in terms of conflict of interest, and therefore you need another party to manage the overall program that can tie together all these pieces and really represent client's best interests and represent what the best answer is for the client. And that is a service that independent and third-party consulting firms like my company, which is Third Stage Consulting, that's an example of one company that can provide such a service. One of the more controversial things I'll say in this video is a broad generalization that doesn't apply in all cases, but in many. And that is that software vendors oftentimes don't understand customers' needs. And when I say customer needs, I mean they don't truly understand their business and their operations. What they do understand is their technology. They understand how their technology works. They understand how it might benefit organizations, which is great. But software vendors and implementation partners are generally not good at digging in and understanding who you are as an organization. They generally don't take the time to understand your strategy, your culture, your risk tolerance, where you are today and how you got there, and also where it is you want to go in the future. What they do instead is typically say, we have a software solution that works for all these different companies out in the world, and we're going to come in and deploy that same solution for you, and we're going to focus on your future state, not so much where you are today and how you got to where you are and your current culture and your tolerance for risk and all that stuff. Now, that may sound reasonable enough on the surface, but the reality is, in order to be successful in the digital transformation, the overall strategy and roadmap and plan and execution has to reflect not only where you're going and what technology you're deploying, but just as importantly, where are you at today and how did you get there? And what's that starting point that you're launching from? It's sort of like going on a trip. You know where your destination is, but you don't know where you're starting. If that were a possibility, you would get lost pretty quickly, as you can imagine. And that's a lot like how software vendors sell their services and their products to customers. So what you have to do is augment that technological understanding the software vendors and implementation partners bring to the table. You have to augment that with business architects and business consultants that understand and can relate to how you're doing business today and what you're trying to accomplish, and really help right-size and adjust the overall strategy and plan to reflect who you are and what your long-term goals, objectives, and priorities are. Another reason why your technology partner should not be the project manager and cannot manage a project on their own is that a digital transformation, a business transformation, is not based solely on technology. It's the non-technological stuff that is going to make your project succeed or fail. It's the change management. It's how well you define your future state processes. It's how well you get aligned as a team and align the overall program with your goals and objectives and strategies as an organization. It's how you tie all these pieces together that are going to make you successful. And again, back to my previous point, technology vendors and implementation partners are typically focused on designing, building, and deploying technology. They're not focused on the overall business transformation. Their definition of success, by the way, is whether or not the system works, whether or not they deliver the scope of functionality that was promised, and whether or not you're actually using the software. Your definition of success is, how does it affect our business? How efficient are we now? How much better off are we now? How much money do we spend on this project? And again, those are two totally different things, and so you need an overarching program management approach that takes into consideration both of those angles and reconciles them into one cohesive plan. I spoke earlier about how there's a difference between program management and project management, but it's worth diving into that point again here in this last point. And that is, when we're looking at a digital transformation, we have to think of it as an overarching program. It's not a project. There are technological leads and a technology project management component of your overall digital transformation. But as I mentioned before, there's several different work streams that need to fall within that. So we really have to broaden our thinking and look at this as a complete program. Now, some organizations have their own internal PMO or program management office. Some organizations don't. And even if you have your own PMO internally, that's a great start. It gives you some governance and controls and charters and things you can start with that's specific to your company. But you also need to bring in that understanding of how complex digital transformations like this work. And if you don't have a PMO, that means you're probably starting off even more premature in that you need to make sure you build out a PMO function so that ultimately you can not only make sure the project is successful, but also to make sure that you're in control of the project. You're in charge, you're directing the project, and you're not letting the technologists go crazy and run off in their own silo to create technology that may or may not work for your business. So by having effective program management in place that the client, you, the customer, provide, then you're going to be more successful in ensuring you have ownership and success with the project. And this PMO service, by the way, is another service that we at Third Stage provide, and you can learn more about that by reaching out to me. So I hope you found this information useful. If you'd like to learn more about how to be successful in your digital transformations, I encourage you to read our ebook called Lessons from 1,000 ERP Projects and Digital Transformations. And in that, we talk a bit about program management, project management, some of the things we've talked about here today, but we cover a number of other best practices and lessons from having helped over 1,000 different organizations through their digital transformations. So I hope you found this information useful and hope you have a great day. These other non-technical, wow. It's how you coexist. I don't know. I don't know why that's the word that came to me. That makes no sense. You found this information useful and hope you have a great